Welcome back to University College London. We're here today to find out from a geographer about the cuts. So, can you tell me, as soon as I cut the camera, what's geography got to do with the cuts?
Well, that's a tough one, I think, but actually it probably has quite a lot to do with the cuts. I mean, first of all, we've got to remember that these cuts are something that are affecting everyone, but in a very selective, specific way.
Right, I mean, I believe actually it's actually almost criminal the way that they're actually affecting some people and not affecting others.
I guess, I mean, a lecturer of mine the other day, who's a geographer, was talking about it using the word violence, the way that they're actually intruding on certain people's rights, the things that they've taken for granted, and stealing them, if you like, from them. And what makes it worse, I guess, is thinking about the way that it's the future generations, even unborn babies in a sense, who are going to have to pay. It's almost like they're taxing future children. They've nothing to do with this crisis, certainly nothing to do with, you know, the problems of higher education, and they're the ones who are going to have to pay for it. So yeah, I would say it's a criminal act.
So can you say who's the cuts mostly going to fall upon?
Well, in terms of education, I guess, the problem that we're going to see is that it's going to become more and more exclusive. And I think one of the key messages that we've been getting out from this occupation is the point that the decisions that are being made by the Lib Dems and the Conservatives is fundamentally an ideological decision, because these cuts don't have to go through. There's a crisis, if you like, and we can look at why there is a crisis, and I think that a large part of the reason why there is a crisis is because certain rich bankers have been causing quite a big mess in what they're doing. But there's a sense to which, if there is a crisis, then we think, well, how do we respond to that, and who has to pay?
So, you know, where did this crisis come from? You said so it was the bankers. You know, are there any other causes, or?
Well, I think that on the one hand, we can look quite simply and say that this crisis has come from certain people overspending in certain areas, and there's a lot of talk, especially once you get as a geographer and studying more, looking at kind of the structure of it and the way that as a system, capitalism, which is what we live in, ultimately will reach these crises because people don't have enough money to buy the things that they're being sold. We give them credit, we lend them money. All very well, someone doesn't have the money, you lend them, they start buying things, but eventually that money that's lent has to be paid back. So eventually you do kind of hit a brick wall. But I think even if we look more specifically at this crisis, we can look to specific players and individuals who haven't really been playing the so-called game fairly. And a lot of the stuff we're doing recently have been looking at organisations like Vodafone, I'm sure maybe people have been talking about before, who haven't been paying their taxes, who have been avoiding, you know, specifically, even illegally, paying the taxes that they're due to pay.
So how are they getting away with this? You know, a lot of corporations avoid tax almost completely. How do they get away with it?
Well, that's a good question. I think, like I say, there is certainly an ideology in our current government which looks and benefits certain types of finance, certain types of sector making big money to the detriment of others. I think that these are complicated issues, but fundamentally decisions are made. Okay. And with the case of Vodafone, decisions were made to say it's okay. You know, they're bringing in lots of money, supposedly. We're friends with them because they've got lots of money, we can let them off. But people talk about this idea that if you tax people, they'll leave the country. Well, I say good riddance, they're here at the moment. And if that tax money isn't coming into society anyway, then what use are there? I think there's a real double standard here in terms of issues like taxation and how to respond to the cuts, you know, in the first place.
I'm curious about the geography of the cuts. You know, is it going to hit the UK in a uniform way, or is it going to hit certain areas more than others?
I think that's a good question, and we're down here in London, and you know the cuts will hit. And thinking outside of the university, the cuts will hit us. There will be people going out of jobs. Probably they'll find another job in London. Probably won't be anything like as good as what they had, but they should be able to find somewhere. You go out, you know, 100 or 200 miles north, places, you know, the northeast, Newcastle, whatever. People go unemployed there. They don't have a choice. I mean, I'm doing a course here with people from Liverpool, I think from the northeast, who have come to study in London. Actually, well, they originally came to London, not because they wanted to, because they had no choice. They came here to work originally, then they couldn't even find a job in London, so they've come back to study. But certainly, I think we'll see this huge, what we've always seen, which is the focus on big cities like London to the detriment of other regions, and it's going to be very, very, very difficult to counteract that. So I think, as a geography, we will see the disparities spatially as well.
Can you actually predict any of these disparities, or is the data's not there yet?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't like to predict. It's not really my area of expertise anyway. But I think we do see common trends happening. and especially, what we've seen, I think we've seen over the last 30 years has always been to give the advantage to finance ahead of industry, always. So it's the City of London. I mean, you go and speak to Boris Johnson or someone, and that they're very keen for London to be a financial centre, no matter what's happening to those transactions and if there's any of that money staying put in England. But being a centre for finance capital, and genuinely to the detriment of industry, and certainly that's a trend that we've seen with it moving to places like China, and now we see geographically China a whole host of issues and problems going on there, which are very linked to our situation here. So I think the world is a very much interconnected place, although in complicated ways.
So this is a student occupation. How can students actually impact our society in a meaningful way?
Well, I hope a lot. I mean, first of all, I think that we are members of society, so whether we're students or not, we are. And I think that what we're seeing with these cuts is everyone is responding. And as the impacts hit them, they respond. So we're seeing that with many unions, the tube workers recently being a case in hand. So just the fact that we're members of society means that we have a lot. We don't need to justify that being students. But obviously the fact that we are students, there's an additional level, which is that we are the centre, if you like, of kind of this production of knowledge. Now, if we here are just going to be producing the same kind of knowledge that is being almost imposed on us from above, in terms of what the top economists, our leaders and bankers are saying, if we're not able to have a space to be critical to that and think of alternative ways, then it's very, very unlikely that other areas are able to find that. So I think there is a responsibility we have here as students, as academics, to be able to, provide a critique to what's happening at the moment, a very harsh critique, and think about other possibilities. And there's been a huge amount of work in that area, but it's getting more and more cut down. And if these cuts go through, then the sort of departments that are going to be shut down are exactly those ones that are probably going to be providing more of a critique. And the kind of private money, the private finance coming in to back the departments that will stay, one would imagine will be increasingly likely to support specific projects or areas of research which have a kind of end in sight. So I think there's going to be more and more difficult to have this kind of general open space for thinking, and that's exactly why we're here now, to have a space, a physical space. As a geographer, it's something important for us, but an open space to be in.
Okay, so if people want to get involved in this space, how can they get involved?
Well, obviously this is one space. If someone told me there's now about, I heard the number 50, it sounds like, if there is, that's fantastic, it sounds like quite a lot, but 50 different occupations going over the UK at the moment. If people are in London, they can come down to the UCL space here. It's in the Jeremy Bentham room in the quad just off Gower Street in central London. People can come in here anytime, pop in. We've got lectures going on all day. We hope to stay here as long as possible, although there may be other forces at B to prevent that. But there are also a host of other occupations in London and around the country, and people can go and get involved. But crucially, they can occupy their own university where they are at, rather than having to go somewhere else. So that's what I'd encourage.
Fantastic. So if you fancy occupying your own university, you can get an inspiration from this place here, because they're doing a really good job. Okay, what's up next on Vision on TV?